we start with the conceptual idea. Xingyi Shi, composed of the 5 animal characteristics. In P-Train and all the other 5 element fists, you see the introduction of each of these forms coming out of this Xingyi Shi, 3 bodies posture, wherein you have the chicken foot, the one-legged power, the Danzong single-weighted power, the compression of and release of the single leg. We use the potential energy of the ascending body wave of the dragon body, as well as the rotation of the waist. We use the tiger neck, which vacillates between pulling up the back, hollowing the chest, and pulling up the back. That range of motion forms, in a sense, the top of the dragon body wave. You have the bare shoulders, the suck in and spit out power of the bare shoulders, which entails pulling the scapula forward such that we can get all the slack out of the pathway. We also have the eagle seizing, the curling in of the fingers, the winding in of the fingers to create this kind of grabbing, gripping, seizing effect. Each of these characteristics have a type of potential store and release power. And in terms of understanding the entire perspective of store and release, we start out with this kind of conceptual Xingyi Shi 5 animal characteristics to set the stage. And looking at the P-Train form, is to see this first transition from Xingyi Shi into the enactment of all 5 animal characteristics: chicken foot, single-legged power, the dragon body, the body wave, ascending and descending, tiger neck, bare shoulders, the eagle seizing, splitting fist or chopping fist. This is the first of the 5 element fists of Xingyi. From a bigger picture point of view, we have this kind of store and release, or you might say pull, suck in, and spit out. Dig deeper, you're going to find a very ingenious layout of overlapping, stacked one upon the other, store and release mechanisms. After this initial transition, after the wind-up, after the storing transition in P-Train, begins as we step forward into this Qi Duan, and then continue into the Luo Fan. Qi Duan, rise and drill. Luo Fan, fall and turn over. In this case, we see the store and release, but as we're releasing, we're simultaneously storing. As you rise and drill, rise, of course, is a way to store power for the fall. Rise and fall. You have the Zhuan, which means to drill. What's drilling? Drilling is a kind of winding. It's a kind of squeezing of the fist, where I'm going to wind and unwind, squeeze and release. As we drill, you'll notice that the foot turning out and the drilling of the fist is essentially turning in the same direction. This will create a corkscrew effect through the entire body. So the entire body, lower basin and upper basin, are wound and ready to unwind. Turning out this foot will load up the waist power. Stepping up, I compress the leg. As I compress the leg and store the power in the leg, I open the lower back gate, round the back, In so doing, I create this kind of stored power through the low back, like pulling the string of a bow that's getting ready to open. From opening the low back to opening the front dantian. Compress the leg, open the low back gate, close the ventral surface of the chest. That chest closing is going to also open and carry the stored power between the front and back dantian of the upper basin. As we sink down, we're going to rise. So we have this rising and sinking that creates this equilibrium between the upper basin and the lower basin. You also have the breath, inhalation, exhalation. Inhalation, store, exhalation, release. Furthermore, you have the neck or the chin, tiger neck, going from pulling up, creating tension through the spine, releasing, hollowing the chest, and then tension once again to bring the energy all the way up to the top of the head and out through the overturning chopping fist. You also have this kind of technique that people use that creates this kind of flinging. Flinging is more of a technique-oriented store and release device. Xingyi. You use the front hand to fling off into the falling, overturning chopping fist. So the sinking into the leg will trigger everything else. It'll trigger the opening of the back. It'll trigger the closing of the upper basin chest. It'll trigger the winding of the drilling fist. It'll trigger the rising, the qi zhuan. And it will trigger also the squeezing of the fist. So essentially, we got everything ready to go. We got the spring of the leg. We have the waist. We have the lower back bow. We have the upper basin bow. The upper basin opening and closing, contributing to the chopping fist. We have the winding of the drilling. We have the squeezing of the fist. All that's getting ready to go into the luo fan, fall, and overturn. Once you've gone over these and are conscious of them, then it's very easy to simultaneously and cohesively make every one of these store and release mechanisms go into the store mode and then into the release mode. In analyzing the store and release mechanisms that you find in the 5-element fist of Xingyi training, you'll find that there's kind of a routine methodology using each of the 5-element fists that pertain to this kind of store and release development of kinetic power, kinetic force. Make contact with the outside opponent, with the outside power. And the outside power is also the ground. So we have these two contact points where the body is the conduit between. You see it, for example, in Bung, which is this kind of small circle. Small circle harmonizes, borrows the power from the opponent, pulls them in, and then I release. But very importantly, what you see is that I got to make contact with the outside, with the opponent, and then step into this chicken step. This is me making contact with the earth, so you can release the power of the 5-element fist in question. So you'll see in each of the 5-element fist forms, this kind of probing hand. Drilling fist is the same. This long line between the tips of the fingers and the back foot. And again, I'm using this kind of drilling to provoke contact, make contact with the opponent. In which case I have contact with the opponent and contact with the ground. For when you utilize the probing hand, you haven't stored the power yet. You're making contact from a long distance. I extend on this long diagonal line to make contact with the opponent. When this back leg comes up and I'm in this rooster leg posture, I'm essentially compressing all the way to the body into the ground while making contact with my opponent. In fact, while borrowing power from my opponent. Because these probing hands, in every case, use a kind of small circle technology to connect with the opponent. So from a long distance, I can make contact, and when I step up into the chicken step, all the other store mechanisms in the body are engaged. Everything between contact with the opponent and the ground through the chicken step is engaged. As you make contact with the opponent, and you utilize this transition from the long leg to the short chicken step, which shortens the distance between you and your opponent. You're doing that because you're getting ready to release. The release will be instantaneous. That means from a distance, this is quite surprising because once you close that distance and utilize the chicken step, the power is ready to go. And that means that as I step into the chicken step, I'm compressing the leg, waiting for that release of the leg. This is the key idea in the rooster leg concept, is to use the stored power through the ground, borrow the power through the ground as you compress the leg. When you make contact with the opponent, you're, in a sense, reverse engineering. As you borrow power, you're going to drill. That will start to bring their power into you and down to your foot. So you can use the stored power of the earth as you're borrowing their power and sucking them in a sense. So I drill and draw them in. I close the chest and draw them in. It's kind of a conduit, point to point. The entire body's a conduit, but there's certain stations of maximum absorption. One being the closing of the chest, opening of the back, closing of the, or compression of the leg. All these are sinking down, compressing. So I'm drawing the power in. But then, as I release the power, I go from the foot, through the leg, into the waist, through the three bases, into the splitting fist. So it's going from the bottom to the top as you release. As you store, you're going from the top to the bottom. It's a very quick transition. This is a very long-winded explanation of what's happening in a very, very brief time period.